don't think I've ever met Peter Hofstadter, and I don't actually know who scheduled him to be on the agenda, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you
Sure.
very much for the invitation anyway. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you could fill us in, Peter.
yeah, we had the pleasure to meet with Dave a year and a half ago, I guess. We showed a prototype of what now is Ontop Studio. We are running a company called Ontop, and we are focusing on virtual knowledge graphs. So basically, everything we do is virtual as default, and we are convinced that the process of mapping data sources to the knowledge graph is quite a crucial activity when you're constructing virtual knowledge graphs. So we focused very much on that with our product. Maybe we can explain a little bit more about that, and that would be more Benjamin. He's more into the technical parts than I am.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to present what you'd like to. I think not a lot of people are familiar with your company and what you guys do, so we're all ears today.
Okay, great. Yeah, I would leave the scene to Benjamin.
Hi everybody, so I'm Benjamin Kogels from the CTO of Ontopic. So as Peter said, first of all we are among the developers of Ontop. So some people are maybe familiar with that system Ontop, which is a virtual knowledge graph that is open source. They've been there for more than 10 years already. That was initially developed in academia, and they still develop partially in academia, and we do support it as well. So yeah, so it's a system where basically you issue some Sparkle queries. The idea that you issue Sparkle queries to Ontop, and it translates them into SQL queries. Then again, it's sent to either directly to one database if you directly, yeah, if Ontop is configured to work directly, for instance, Oracle on database like that, or to a database federator like Denodo, Dremio, if you need to access several databases at the same time. And the idea is that with this approach, what we save is you don't need to move the data into a triple stores. So you can access very fresh data. And if you generate good SQL queries, you can have also sometimes very good performance if the backend is able to support efficiently this SQL query. So in particular, for many queries, we can have no join or very little joins. Depends on the complexity of the map, of the structure of the database, and so on.
So hang on a second, Benjamin. So are your maps R2RML or RML or something else, or what do they look like? How do you make them?
Yes. So yeah. So for a system like Ontop, that's a very good question. So we need to have a mapping. That's a fundamental component for us. And for mapping, it has to be. So we only speak with. For us, the database looks like a relational database. So it can be, in practice, it can be a database system like federator like Dremio that actually allows us to create, for instance, MongoDB or CSV file or JSON files. But actually, for us, we just see them as tables. So that's the magic that is doing a system like Dremio is doing for us. And then, so since we start from a relational, we see our data source as relational, then we use R2RML as the main standard. We also have some other dialects, but the basis is really R2RML as a standard for the mapping for going from the structure of the database to RDF. And so once you have the mapping, you can give it to Ontop. You can also give an ontology, and then you start on top. That's it. And the main challenge in this is to design the mapping,
right,
which can be a huge effort.
Yep.
So, and is where basically our company Ontopic enters is that so we were using Ontop, and we are building virtual knowledge graph in several projects. And it was always difficult at some point in the project. Doing the mapping was getting quite an inefficient process, and the larger it gets, the harder it is to fix it, to update it, and to get a general picture of what is going on. So we decided to start building a tool called Ontop Studio, which is an editor for designing such a mapping. And the novelty in the studio is that we have kind of a low code approach, where one of the goals is to write the mapping without writing SQL queries most of the time.
Right.
So we extract directly the DB metadata from the database. So we see all the tables directly. So then when you open the table, you can see all the columns. You can have a sample of the data, so you get an idea of what is inside. You can also, eventually, if you need, you can also apply some functions for cleaning. So you can do uppercase, lowercase. You can nullify some values that you don't want to have in your knowledge graphs. And then what you can do is you can map it. And the ideas of mapping is that you don't need to, most of the time, you don't need to write the SQL queries. You just take your columns and
Mark is just reminding me we're going to have the hand raising discipline here because there's a lot of people here. But yeah, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand. I'll try and catch you. But Mark, go ahead.
I was going to ask. I think Benjamin was just going to come on to it because I was saying, is there a mapping of like column description to predicate in the triple store? Is that the way that you do it? And then the next question I was going to ask is, what if you have if you've got lots of tables but they have similar columns? How do you deal with customer name in this one is called cust name in that one, and that kind of thing? Is it, how do you sorry, there's a bit of a rambly question, but there's
Yes, that's a good question. So so yeah, many mapping entries are very simple. Are not necessarily all simple, so we can really deal with non-trivial mappings between the sources. But in many cases, yeah, your column you can map it directly to property as a literal. So for many of them, it can be quite fast. But then if once you need to model more, to make a more complex model, then you can also do it.
Yeah.
Then when you have many tables, so if your many tables are having a different structure, yes, you need to provide a different mapping entry all the time. So I have to say that, for instance, something called L name is a last name, and if it's called differently in another table, I have to also map it to my concept last name. Or
yeah, and one other question, sorry, on the subject is, what do you do about identity smooshing as well? Because one of the problems we always come across is that in one table the primary key is 1 2 3 4, and in the next table the same thing is called 4 5 6 7. And how do you say that those two entities are the same rather than the two columns are the same? And sort of same question rather than down across.
Yes. So in case you really want to have the same identifiers you want to use the same one. Our approach is not to use the same as approach because in same as you use it to have more and more triples in your graph, so your result gets more and more complex, you have more volumes. So instead, what we usually do is we try to get a canonical identifier.
Okay.
To decide which one is a canonical identifier for a data set, and then for that you need to have a linking table.
Yep.
And the thing about the mapping is that yeah,
so the linking table does your same as for you, is that the
yes, well, it tells you, okay, for this identifier from source one, your canonical identifier will be the other ones.
Yeah.
And then you have a
but yes, it's not nice, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to, but the one interesting aspect is that you can, if you specify it as a canonical identifier inside Ontops, it saves you from having to, every time you want to use the first identity, you can do your mapping with the 2 different identifying systems, use 2 different templates. And then somewhere else you say, actually, I can map all the things from one identifier system to the other one using the joining table. And then automatically Ontop will insert internally the join between the joining tables and everywhere you use the IRI template you would like to replace. So you don't have to be super disciplined.
Nice. Yeah.
You don't have to be that disciplined, and you can have the system do it for you.
And one last question: does that have a very bad effect on the performance, or is it okay?
Well, if you use a joining table, so for the identifiers you don't want to use in your final graph, you will have to do a join. So yes, it can have a cost. It depends after that how you design. Yeah, if it's a distributed cost, if the joining table is not in the same data source, then the join will have to be post-processed, so it can be expensive. Yes, depends on your workload. So yeah,
it depends is a good answer.
So are we gonna get a demonstration, or are we gonna see what some maps look like, stuff like that?
if you're interested, yeah, I could.
I assume
I think
we're
you're-
interested. Raise
You're
your
among
nod
friends
if
here,
you're
Benjamin.
interested.
This is a group of data nerds. We're interested in your mapping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't maybe show it to your mum.
Okay, so
Hmm.
let's try an example from scratch, perhaps. Do you see my tab?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, you do. Okay, so I will use, so for demo, I propose to use element from the destination tutorial we did last year.
Yeah. JT, are we record? Oh yeah, we are recording this. Okay.
Yep.
I assume that yeah.
Okay, maybe I will start it from screen. Okay, so I'm creating a project. So basically, so that's our unit of work. So, okay, it's there. Okay, so when I have a project, so one of the first things we'll do here is that we will load an ontology. So we have a map, we have an ontology editor where we can specify the ontology by hand, but most of the time we want actually to import it directly. And so I will take here schema. I'm using here schema.org. So that's yeah. So I'm loading a schema.org, and then the next thing we do is we want to connect to the database. So here we do have a local instance of database on the server. With, okay. And okay, so once I've put the credential to the database, I can directly go on a part called lenses. So lenses is so on the left, I see all the tables I do have in my database. So in part, I can filter these tables when I have too many per schema. So in that example database, we have a schema called source one, which is supposed to be the table coming from a first source. And the way we work we decided to introduce an intermediate level, an intermediate abstraction code that we call the lens. So a lens, you can just view it as a virtual view. So initially we call it actually a view, but we realized people were getting confused because when we say that we are working with virtual views and then we are transforming these virtual views, they were a bit afraid that we are creating virtual views inside the database and we are modifying and deleting them. So some people were a bit concerned about that, but actually we are not doing such a thing. We have a read-only access to the database, so we don't modify anything on the database. Instead, we handle some views at the level of the virtual knowledge graph engine, at the level of Ontop. And with this notion of views, so here at the moment it's a mirror view. It has exactly the same structure as the original underlying table, and we can apply some transformations. Like for instance, here I'm transforming a column that was having a binary format into a well-known text, which is a text format for the geometry. So that I can use this well-known text format later on in my mapping. I can also, if I want, I can also clean the data. Like I see that I have some, so here it's a table that is talking about hotels and lodging business in general in our region that we use for, that's open data that we use for the demo. And sometimes we have some bad values, like we have something like have a longitude of 0, which is clearly not in Europe's. No, latitude of 0, that is not in Europe. So we have to, that's clearly a kind of data that we want to eliminate. So if I then look at the transformation, I can do a nullify. And then I can say every time I see the 0, and I can replace this value by a null. And the fact that I replace the value by a null will imply that they will not appear in a knowledge graph when I will do my mapper later on. That's one of the ideas. So I can do some transformation, and I can do some concat. Actually I have access to all the SQL functions, so I can do a lot of transformation there. And then when I'm ready, I can start. I can go to that lens and start doing the mapping. Perhaps yes, quick demo. So okay, here is a classical representation of a table, but if I click there, I do a transpose of the table. So that's the same content, but here for each row actually correspond to one database table column.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another representation, and that's a representation we do use when we want to do the mapping. So when I have a table like that, so which is talking about, as I told you, about lodging businesses, the first thing you usually do is that, okay, we want to assign a class to each row of this table, of this lens, sorry. So in that case, we click on a button called C+, where we want to create what we call a class entry. So we need to define the subject first. And for defining the subject, we need to create a NIRI template. So here the system can create it automatically for us. So we can modify if we want. And the trick is that it uses the primary key directly. Mm-hmm. So it uses the best practices for designing templates. So people that are not familiar with templates for the virtual approach, then sometimes they just have to select the default option. And then we have to specify the class. So we have, you can see all the classes from the ontology in the menu. So we select lodging business from schema.org. And that's it. We have a first mapping entry. Then if I want to map, for instance, the name, I can create for the same subject, I can create another property. It is called name. Then I can select the column name in English. It infers automatically the data types for us, like is XSD string using the R2ML standards. It tells you that it should be a string, but if I want, I can provide a more specialized language tag so that it's it's a bit more precise. And it's particularly useful for data sets because we have data in 3 different languages, so language tags are very useful. And if I want to create, okay, okay, what I can do is if I want to create a geometry, no, not have it there. Okay. Okay, let me import another ontology. So I would like to use as well GeoSparkle.
Okay.
We just import it. And then if I want to assign the geometry, I can select the default geometry. And you see it's declared as an object property in the ontology, so it automatically suggests me to specify an ERI. So here I need to create a new ERI because yeah, I want, so that's, the geometry has to be an object, so I need to create a new ERI, but I can use the same primary key. And then I can can create a new property entry using this new ERI template. And I want to say that he has geometry. Then is it called? Okay, 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 I don't remember. Sorry. Don't view it among the columns. Oh. Okay, so yeah, so that way I can create mapping entries about another subject. Sorry for, no, I don't see the value. Okay, maybe something. Yeah. So that way you go on and go on, so you will get more and more mapping entries. At any time, I can start start a Sparkle endpoint based on Ontop, and I can directly test my existing mapping to the box. So I can ask, in that case, I can ask about give me some Metadog lodging business. And then you see, I got directly the any of them. And when I can also search among the mapping entries, so it's very useful when you have many. So here I just spent a few minutes, so I just have 3 of them. But obviously, the more you very quickly you can, when you have 100 of them, it's very important to be able to search per class, per template, or per property. And yeah, also when you interesting thing is that you also have links. When you're in ontology, you can also see for the class, you can see where they are used, and it directly brings you back to the search. So we want to have as much integration as possible between the various components. If I want to change the definition, I click on the entry, and then yeah, here I am. So, and last not least, so we can snapshot any the mapping and the ontology and the lenses that when we are happy about them. And if I click then on the repository, then I will see we have a Git repository for this data. Okay. And important point is that the output, so we can get our output is actually an R2ML mapping. So by default, our mapping is defined over the lenses. So if you want to use them with definition, which is a moment is specific to Ontop. Perhaps you don't see. Oh, sorry, because I was switching to another angle. So, sorry.
Looks like Aura has a question at this point.
Oh,
Aura?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to understand. I mean, to me, and forgive me if I characterize this incorrectly, big part of this is that it's sort of a user interface over R2RML.
Yes.
Sort of being able
Yep.
to write and these lenses, to me, seem a little bit like what would go into the SQL query property in an R2RML mapping.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I understand. Now, my real question is that, are you able to compare this to this company called DataLens and their
DataLens.
DataLens and their
Yeah.
product?
Okay. So, yeah. So they also use, I think, the term lens, but probably not exactly for the same thing. So lens, we just use it because we needed another terms and views because it was confusing people.
No, I understand, but I mean, if your whole product, I mean, how do you kind of compare that with DataLens?
Yeah, the main characteristics is that we are specialized on the virtual approach. So the mapping can be used for two things. You can use it for the virtual approach as we do, means that to give it to Ontop to answers for answering Sparkle query by translating them into SQL.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we are doing most of the time. But as any mapping in R2ML, you can also use it for materializing an ODF graph.
Yeah.
That after that you can populate in a triple
DataLens seems more geared towards building ETL.
Yes. So
yeah.
I would say most of the people, the vast majority of the tools are for ETL purposes.
Right.
And we are specialized, our particularity is that we are specialized for the virtual approach. Make everything, sure everything works for the virtual approach.
All right, excellent, thank you.
So Mark and then Michael.
So I like what I see, and I'm trying to kind of map it to my worldview. What kind of customers are using what you make? Who are the kind of who wants to write Sparkle when you could write SQL? I suppose that's over characterizing it, but who is that person? Because I want to meet them.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we are not necessarily against SQL. Okay, so the main thing we are trying to achieve is to integrate data, so in an efficient manner. So at the moment, so what we expose is a knowledge graph, so it's only queryable as Sparkle, but nothing forbids you that you could also build some SQL views above that integrated data afterwards.
SQL to Sparkle to SQL. That's it.
Yeah, that sounds like a crazy idea, but actually can still make sense because the point is that from Sparkle to the SQL of the data source, the map.
Lost him. Yeah, he froze.
Good pause space.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Oh no.
Yep.
Oh, hey, you froze there,
Yeah,
Benjamin.
he froze. Yep.
Okay, so if, for instance, if you want to have a customer, you want to create a customer views, you want to know have a table about our customers and certain number of column about customers. Well, the difficulty in data integration is how you get the data for that customer views when you have customer data that come from 5 different sources. Maybe all the columns you will have to get, they come from different tables. So, so the definition can be super complex with a lot of unions, a lot of joins and left joins, whatever. So at least with the knowledge graph approach, what is very neat is that you can specify your mapping. What we try to demonstrate that you can specify your mapping with not having to write many joins. So most of the time you don't need the joins. Left joins, it's exceptional. In practice, I never write left joins. And you don't have to deal with unions directly yourself. So somehow the specification of mapping is much simpler with knowledge graph.
Okay.
And after that, the problem you're talking about, how people want to consume this data after it's integrated. So at the moment, it's only accessible as Sparkle, but we definitely are thinking to.
It's on my mind because I went to a conference with Denodo yesterday, and they do similar kind of thing, but they have SQL on the top, don't they? So, yeah, okay. Sorry, I have to go now, but this has been very nice. Thank you very much.
Yep. See you, Mark. And we got Michael and then Adrian queued up.
Hi, yeah, a quick question. So we have used R2ML in the past, and we use Tarko often. And when we use Tarko, we usually have it as part of a GitHub repository. So we version control the mapping functions. Do you have a convenient way to version control your mapping functions, your mapping specifications?
Yeah, that's what I try to demo. But so when I click on the repository button, actually I was going to a Git repository that we embed with Ontop.
Okay.
So and it was a different, was different tab, so you could not see it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
But yeah.
Perfect. Adrian.
Right. If you would like, I could show some use cases where we use Ontop, because we use Ontop quite heavily. Not the front end, but I give you an idea of what we do with it. And we started working with Ontop way before there was a web front end. And I'll quickly show you what the way we do it. This is a template repository on GitHub. So when you click on use this template, it will basically copy it. And to show, oh yeah, that would actually help. Huh? Let me share. I think now you see my screen, right?
Yep.
So this is the template repo, and this is this one here. This is an instance of it, so I forked it. And in here we have everything preset for mapping a MySQL database completely. And I can quickly show you that in action. There is this new thing called git pod, where you simply give a array of a GitHub repo. And now it basically forks a Docker container with a Visual Studio in it, bootstraps everything. And then I have a virtual dev environment. And what we did, which is something we will release soon as open source, is we created a domain-specific language. I like web interfaces, but I personally are a bit more the programming kind of guy. So we defined a mapping language which can output R2RML mappings, for example. It doesn't look like Turtle. It's way easier to write, and you have some kind of auto-completion. So you would define the tables. This is basically generated from the tables. So you see, sorry, this is the vocabulary, not the tables. The tables are defined here. This is an extremely simple example with only very basic things, but you will get the point. And then you have the mapping here. And let me do a change. I quickly take this away, or I actually comment this so I can show you how it works. Let's comment this. So you have a DSL with auto-completion. You can say, I want to have the property X name. I cannot use double quote for DSL reasons, but it's basically an RDF property. And you say, I want to get this from the table, and then you get the auto-completion from the tables you have available. Let's take the name. And you say, this is a language tagged property, and the language is English. When you save that, I will delete it, otherwise it's double. It will create an R to RML mapping in here. This is this one here. And now I can simply generate the mapping. So everything is scripted here. How do I save it in this environment? I think I need to change something, otherwise it's not triggered. Give me a sec. Files here. So we put that here. And somewhere there are scripts. I don't know what's triggered here. So it downloads Ontop from the GitHub repository from them, converts the stuff, and then generates somewhere the triples, and I think they are in here. Yeah. So this is the generated triples. And we basically use that to materialize SQL tables from customers. One example is when they want to have a data catalog, they have a whole bunch of SQL databases and they simply want to have an RDF view on top of it. So it looks more like related stuff. In this example here, for example, where is it? This is there are a lot of things missing. Give me a sec. So here we have like 3 different data sources and all of them are mapped via Ontop. And then we simply generate the graph view so they can explore all the data from multiple sources and visualize it in this data catalog. And that's how they explore their SQL data when they want to find for data scientists, what can we do with the data? They dig into that stuff. They find it in the knowledge graph. They go then from the knowledge graph to the SQL database and they do whatever they want on top of SQL in that application here. Here we don't virtualize the full data. We only virtualize the metadata. In some other customers, they virtualize the complete relation database because they want to have an RDF view, a graph view on top of it. And to maybe emphasize that, so the core of what they do as well is an R2RML implementation and an extremely performant one. We use it with Oracle, with MySQL, with Postgres, with pretty much everything. It's absolutely fantastic. And the support is also great. And I don't get paid by them, so I'm really a happy open source user for this thing. It's really, really well done, very stable.
So you use Ontop, but not Ontopic Studio. Is that
Yes, exactly.
right? Okay.
We use the engine behind.
Yeah. Okay.
Haven't Ontotext GraphDB and AllegroGraph incorporated Ontop into their offering now? Am I right?
I don't know.
So yeah, so Ontopic Studio should work with them as well. I'm not sure they yet support. They may not have yet the support for lenses in the sense that maybe it does not allow you to also specific to just map the lenses, but it's a matter of time. So.
Well, according to the Franz site, looks like AllegroGraph provides an integration with Ontop.
Yes, yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah.
I think it's basically the only well-done open source implementation of R2RML right now.
Any other thoughts or questions for our guests today?
Oh, that was good. That's very helpful. So wait, hang on a second. So Ontopic Studio, is that a commercial project or is that open source?
No, it's commercial. So
Okay.
we just.
So what does it cost?
Sorry.
How much does it cost?
Oh, I can leave that to Peter.
You know, inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah, at the moment, the base version would be 15,000 euro.
Per what? Per seat? Per enterprise?
That's per site.
Per site. Okay. Okay. Well, I don't know if I have anything more. Does anybody else? That was good. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
any big picture comments there, Peter, while you're on? Takeaways we should have before we say goodbye.
Well, the base point is we started right now with the Ontop Studio. We are really we are really curious how people will react to it. We do think it's quite a unique tool for very large RML projects. We have to do a lot of mapping. As I said, we are curious really how it's received, and that's our current challenge at the moment. We are. The main thing is we open to cooperation, so we are at the moment really open for partnerships, because being a very niche product, I think there's a lot of cooperation with other companies, since we are trying to not invade space of other companies. We are focusing on the virtual approach. That's our main topic, and we are really focusing also on the mapping editor thing.
Yeah.
So I see that Michael has a question.
There you go.
Yeah, I was just wondering about federation. So if you're using Tarkle and you have already an endpoint with a bunch of data, and you need to look something up to make your IRI because you're building another set of triples from another source, you can do that very conveniently using federation. So I'm wondering if R2RML itself, or if somehow you guys support that. So if can you ingest data from multiple relational databases at the same time, or does it link only to one? That's an R2ML question, I guess.
Yes. So the way we approach it, we already did that in projects. So if I want to have some CSV, for instance, some CSV file together with some databases, I will use directly a system like Dremio. So for instance, yeah, for dealing with files, Dremio is very good. And and then I will do my mapping above Dremio. So the R2ML is for Dremio. And then I can ask Dremio to do the join between the CSV and the Oracle instance, as we did. And then if I start having some performance issues, I can ask Dremio to pre-compute certain joins, or to create some what they call reflections. So, for instance, if you use it for BI, you can ask Dremio to pre-compute a lot of interesting things, so you can have good performance.
Is there a presumption that your users will mostly be using R2ML as a virtualization engine, or as an ETL, or is it a lot of both?
For us, we expect people mostly to use it for, we hope in a virtual approach, but it can all be used in other ways. So at least for projects in which we are involved, yeah, we always use in virtuals. But we know that, yeah, you have people like Adrian.
Yeah, so then it doesn't really. Yeah, so then working with Tarkle would be a less interesting question. Thank you.
We use it a lot with materialization, and a lot of our customers materialize tables. It's extremely efficient for materializing large amounts of data.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Thank you guys a lot. Really appreciate seeing where you've come with that.
Yeah, thanks for all the info.
Yeah, thank you for your patience and for your time. It was really a pleasure to introduce the product and ourselves. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.